Dean Cheng is a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, a think tank here in Washington, D.C. His focus is on Chinese political and security affairs. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So how far has China's Navy come along, especially in recent years, 69 years, but we've seen a lot of changes in just the last few.
Oh, huge. If you think back just even 20 years, China's Navy at the end of the 20th century was largely what's considered a brown water fleet, or maybe a green water fleet, meaning it really wouldn't operate more than about 100 miles from shore. It had maybe a dozen fairly modern surface combatants. Fast forward 20 years, and now China is, as your report just noted, launching its first homegrown aircraft carrier. There aren't that many countries anywhere that have a homegrown aircraft carrier. It has dozens of very modern surface combatants, dozens of very modern submarines, and very important in today's age, a full suite of electronic capabilities aboard many of those ships, much of which is domestically produced.
Well, let's talk about this first domestically built aircraft carrier. How significant is that, and what does that signify, if you could just break it down for our international audience?
Well, building an aircraft carrier is sort of like building a very large supertanker, except it's much more complex. You have a ship that has to be able to launch aircraft and land aircraft. It has to be able to hold aircraft to repair them. It is a floating city, a floating arsenal, and a floating airbase all at once. So there's a reason why there's maybe 5 or 6 countries total that have a shipbuilding industry that can manufacture an aircraft carrier on its own. And China is now, with this ship, announcing it is joining the ranks of that elite few.
Well, exactly, and if you could expound on that for us, with the number out there, what does this say about China's place on the global stage?
Well, the United States has, I think, about 11 aircraft carriers. It is the largest carrier fleet in the world. But after that, Great Britain is currently building 2. Russia has an old carrier. France has 1. So you see China is now basically taking its place with 2 carriers alongside the Royal Navy and alongside the U.S. Navy. These are traditionally maritime powers. China is basically in the fascinating position of being a continental land-oriented country that is also the first one in history that has become a maritime power, dependent on the seas. And it is building a fleet to protect those maritime interests.
Military and just this aircraft carrier, we've been seeing a lot of reforms with this focus on modernization. What has stood out to you as you've watched this process?
Well, 2 things. One is the new PLA Strategic Support Force, which brings together China's space warfare, electronic warfare, and cyber capabilities. And this is quite unique. No other military in the world has created a service that brought all of these pieces together. And the other piece, as you noted, it's modernization, is how comprehensive this effort is. This is not just modernizing the Navy or modernizing its space forces. This is all of the services, including the ground forces. It is the Air Force, it's the Navy. It is not just combat forces, but electronic support capabilities. This is a very well thought out, comprehensive effort. On the occasion of the 69th anniversary of the founding of the Navy, the Chinese military, its high command, the Central Military Commission, has every right to be very proud of what it has achieved, because it is now demonstrating that it views war in the most professional way and the most serious way.
All right, we'll leave it there. Dean Cheng, always great to have you on. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.